Alright, so this is a tomato review on the Gezahnte tomato, or Gezahnte tomato. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I would imagine it's Italian, the way it's said, but this is how it's spelt. Alright, that's about all I know. Now, I've been growing this tomato for about 3 years. The first year I grew it, I got a really nice harvest from it. Very large tomatoes came out of it. And I mean, tomatoes bigger than my fist. I'll put it to you that way. They were huge. And for some reason, I didn't save seed from it. It is like that from time to time with me. Unfortunately, you know, when you grow 100, 150, 200 varieties of tomatoes, it's a lot of work to try to take the tomatoes, separate the seeds, grow them individually, then do individual reviews on it. It just becomes a lot of work. So sometimes I just let them go, and I'll just get back to them the next year, and that way I get a little more familiar with the growing pattern of the tomato and that kind of a thing. So I grew this one, the first year I grew it, got a fantastic harvest out of it. I don't know, probably about 30 tomatoes came out of it. In fact, there were so many tomatoes coming out of it, they were rotting they were just falling to the ground and rotting. There's no way I was able to even eat them. There were just massive amounts of them. And so since then, I haven't really been doing that good with it. It's not because the plant won't do well. It's just because within the last couple of years anyway, the blight has been so bad here that I almost can't even grow tomatoes, period. It's really gotten to a point where I'm just going to have to stop growing tomatoes for a few years and just, you know, I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, even if I don't plant tomatoes, they will grow anyway because they pop up randomly around my property anyway. But the blight is just really bad, and this tomato, it's just one of those tomatoes that just doesn't want to grow right. It either gets blossom end rot pretty easily, or it gets wiped out by the blights, and I never really get a chance to, you know, really grow the tomato. I really got to grow it under special conditions, give it full attention, pick off all the leaves. It's a lot of work to do that. It's not like just throwing a tomato seed in the ground and watching it grow. This is going to take a lot of attention to grow it, in other words. It's not because the tomato is not a good variety. It's just it seems to be a little bit more insensitive to environmental conditions. It does not like blight. So just keep that in mind growing this tomato if you grow it. It's one of those tomato varieties that you're going to have to give it a little bit of attention and really pay a close attention to the diseases. And if it's going to get a lot of water and weather, it's going to be very prone to blossom end rot. And that's an unfortunate thing because you might have 20 tomatoes on there, and if 18 of them get blossom end rot on there, you pretty much lost your crop. That's as bad as the blight. So that's the one thing I noticed about this tomato. It's really sensitive to the conditions, and you really want to baby this one. All right, so as far as I know, it's a Solanum lycopersicum. I will put all the correct details in the description and title. Once I get to the upload of it, I will find out what exactly it is, but I'm pretty sure it's a lycopersicum. I do believe this was bred and raised in Italy. It's one of the tomatoes that were bred in Italy for certain Italian dishes, for certain kinds of food that they make in Italy. Like, for example, paste tomatoes are bred that way in Italy to get a paste tomato. There are certain tomatoes grown specifically for that reason. And so there were, back in the 1500s, something like that, tomatoes were becoming very, very popular in Italy, and they started to refine their tomato growing ability. You know, they started refining it to the point where they were growing for certain features in their dishes. And I believe this is one of the ones that were the original tomatoes that were grown for that purpose. Another example of that would be the Santa Maria, the Colombi tomato. There's a number of other tomatoes that were kind of grown for that purpose in Italy, for certain types of tomato dishes that require tomatoes. So let's do a bricks on this. Now this is a very dry tomato. So I'm under the impression this is pretty much going to be a chalky experience. And it was that way even from the first time I grew it. It was kind of a little bit on the chalky side. It's 5 in the bricks. And they give you a closer look at what it looks like in the middle. I'll cut this one open. Now I really didn't get that many seeds this year from it, but I should have a good enough seed stock for seeds. I don't know if I'm going to offer seeds yet on my website. Once I get a good bumper crop from this particular variety, then I'll offer seeds. I really don't have enough here to really offer. I probably barely got enough to start enough seed for next year. So let's cut this in half and give it a taste test. Right out the gate, it's very low in sweetness, but again, that might be partly due to just some of the environmental conditions. Sometimes that happens, but it's not real low. I'd say sweetness-wise, it's probably going to be about 22%, something like that. Really not that much sweetness in it. It's high in mineral content, more or less. That most of that 5 on the bricks is probably mostly minerals, but the sweetness wasn't that high. Tangy part was quite tangy. The flesh part of it was, if you were going to separate this tanginess, the flesh part I'm probably going to say about 32 on the flesh, but then once you get to the skin, you start crunching up the skin, a real tarty flavor comes out of it, and that brings that number up, probably 35. So the skins were very tarty. The flesh was kind of tangy, but not that tangy. But as an overall, if you're chewing it up with the flesh and everything, the whole overall would bring that whole number up to like 40. I would definitely, maybe 35. 35 is probably a number that I would work with that tomato. Skins weren't really tough, but they were kind of thick. So I was able to chew them up. They broke up pretty nicely. They didn't just separate from the flesh and stick to the roof of my mouth. Not a heavy seed producing tomato, at least in a small stage. You can see I don't have many seeds in there. So it's not very heavy on the seed production. You will have to grow quite a few of these plants if you're looking to sell seeds and harvest seeds from this. So you're going to want to grow more than one plant, and you're going to want to grow them in different areas of your property so you get the best production out of it. What else? It's a regular leaf plant. It is indeterminate, and it's a pretty good producing tomato plant if you can get it to grow healthy without getting attacked by disease. It'll put out, 2 dozen, 30 tomatoes probably in the season. It's a very productive plant, even though these tomatoes aren't at the best optimal right now. Again, here's a look at the inside. As far as the tomato flavor itself, outside of the sweet, outside of the tangy, tomatoes have a tomato flavor. And that flavor is usually the part that I try to describe to you that falls in between the sweetness and the tangy, and in that middle is where that tomato flavor lies. So that number is usually the percentage between the tangy and the sweet. Whatever that leftover percentage out of 100% is where that, that tomato flavor and the moisture and stuff part is. So in that middle part, it had a really nice tomato flavor. Very, very nice. I would probably say it would be good for sauce. I'm going to be honest with you. Even though it's a very dry tomato, it has that tomato sauce, Italian tomato sauce flavor to it. I really like the taste of it. Again, this is a tomato that needs to be much better developed. It is a hollow tomato, just so you know. You can see here that the seeds are not attached to the rind. They're very, very closely attached to the core, just like a pepper tomato or any of the hollow tomatoes. So it is a hollow tomato, but just because it's a hollow tomato doesn't mean that you can't make tomato sauce with it. So they do, make good sauce. It's just going to cook down much quicker. You might need to add a little bit of water. If you add water, I recommend you add distilled water, because that's not going to bring any flavors into the mix. You just want to add a little moisture. That's all you want to do. So if it's too dry for you, add a little moisture. But I still think this would make a fantastic tomato sauce. Again, this is a pink tomato. Just so you know, this is a pink variety of a fluted tomato from Italy. So I'm not sure what else to say about it. It's a really good tomato. It is kind of hard to grow. You're going to have to give it a few tries, maybe a couple of years in a row. It's really this tomato does really good. Like I grew it in one part of my greenhouse and it did really good. Grow it in another part of my greenhouse and it didn't like it. So this tomato is very picky on where it likes to grow. It likes certain types of sunlight at certain angles and stuff like that. If you can get that dialed in right, this tomato will be a massive tomato producer for you. You'll do really good with it. All right, so that was your tomato review for the Gezahnte tomato. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.